Quiet on set. Speed. And action.
I can feel your recriminations and your judgment, and I am fine with it.
Welcome to the Foot and Friends on Film podcast, discussing everything about cinema. Now here's your host, Nick Baylor.
He's my younger brother. I taught him everything he knows.
I guess I'm a pretty sick guy.
Secrets of my life.
Welcome to the official podcast of Foot and Friends on Film.com, where we discuss everything about cinema. I'm your host, Nick Mailer. On today's episode, we're talking about Academy Award-winner Christian Bale. John's going to get on the phone. We're going to discuss his career from childhood roles all the way up to Ford v Ferrari and what's coming next. Thanks for joining us. Take your seat and grab your popcorn. It's time for your feature presentation. As mentioned, we are the official podcast of Foot and Friends on Film.com, where our motto is any film you haven't seen is a new experience. On this episode, we're talking about Christian Bale. You guys know the routine, so without further ado, please welcome John H. Foote. So we're here to talk about an actor who, for my money, is one of the best working actors out there today. He's got a very impressive filmography, and he's won an Academy Award. Of course, we're talking about Christian Bale. Now, he's known for a lot of things, but he was a child actor who had a substantial early role in a film I know you love to talk about. In 1987, worked with Steven Spielberg in Empire of the Sun.
Yeah, and he kind of came out of nowhere. Spielberg's famous for casting child actors and making stars of them. And this was an extraordinary performance. He plays Jamie, a young guy who is somehow separated from his parents during the evacuation of Shanghai, and is taken to a prisoner of war camp where he exists for the next few years, lying, cheating, stealing, hustling, doing whatever it takes to stay alive. And it's a pretty fascinating performance. I was really surprised he wasn't nominated for an Academy Award for this, but Henry Thomas was snubbed for E.T. as well, so it just goes to show. It was kind of instant stardom for him. I mean, overnight this kid was a major movie star. And the movie received great reviews, but it failed at the box office. It didn't find an audience that it so deserved, and became a big hit on video. Video cassettes were all the rage, and when it was released on home video, audiences found it and thought, where has this movie been? Well, it's been there all along. I thought it was the best film in 1987. I think it's one of Steven Spielberg's finest films, and certainly introduced us to Christian Bale in a big way.
He had a series of roles as a child, not many of significance, but some of my musical theater friends would never forgive me if I don't mention 1992's Newsies.
Yeah, this was made for Disney, and he plays Jack Kelly, kind of the leader of the kids that deliver the newspapers for Pulitzer, and it was a colossal bomb, an absolute bomb. But incredibly, it became kind of a cult classic. Again, on video, and they made a Broadway musical out of it. And, he got to work with Robert Duvall, who played Pulitzer, the head of the newspaper, and lots of singing, lots of dancing. And he proved to be, a talented dancer, very athletic. But, as a film, you watch Newsies again today, and you understand in every way why it failed. It's just not very good. It's just not very interesting. But I guess the charisma and the star power of Bale shines right through. I mean, there's no doubt this guy's going to be a big star, even in bad films.
In 1995, Bale appeared via voice role in Disney's Pocahontas. It was the first of two times he appeared in a film that told the story of John Smith and Pocahontas.
Yeah, this one's got interesting memories for me. My daughter was 3. And this was the first movie we took her to see in a movie theater. She had seen the trailers on, I think it was The Lion King home video for months. And when it was finally released, we said, we got to take her. We got to go. So we took her, and she just loved it. She was overwhelmed by the screen, the size of the people, the sound, loved every minute of it. And the interesting thing about Pocahontas was Tom Cruise was supposed to voice John Smith. They drew his image, and then he had to back away for some reason, and Mel Gibson stepped in to do the voice. So you have Mel Gibson's voice coming out of a Tom Cruise cartoon. And Christian Bale played one of the lesser characters in the film, Thomas, and is very good. I mean, the entire film, it's one of Disney's better animated films in that era, and won the Academy Award for Best Song for Colors of the Wind.
Mm-hmm. It sort of was coming towards the end of what people call the Disney Renaissance in the late 80s and early 90s. It's interesting you mentioned the Tom Cruise design, because the design for Aladdin physically resembles Tom Cruise, and that was also intentional.
It does. I mean, Tom Cruise at that point was one of the biggest movie stars in the world. So Disney, never one to to turn away from exploiting anybody and not paying them, absolutely designed Aladdin on Tom Cruise, designed John Smith on Tom Cruise, probably without Tom Cruise's permission.
Yeah, probably.
That's just how Disney rolls.
We definitely got to do a Tom Cruise episode sometime soon.
At some point, yeah. Interesting that in the same year Pocahontas came out, Toy Story came out.
Yeah.
And kind of revolutionized animation forevermore. Computer animation became the big thing and remains the big thing.
Yeah, and Pixar being one of Disney's major sub-properties, along with Marvel and Lucasfilm.
And Fox.
And yeah, now, which is now 20th Century Studios, yeah.
Yeah. The greed, another show. The greed at Disney sickens me, but that's another show.
I actually was just watching an episode of The Simpsons, which sort of parodies Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and they sing a song which is reminiscent of Hi Ho, It's Off to Work We Go. And over the closing credits, they revisit the song, and they make a joke about how if Disney sues, they'll claim fair use, with the irony being now that Disney owns The Simpsons. So.
Yes.
Yeah. You also wanted to mention, before we get into his adult work, a film he did with Todd Haynes in 1997 called Velvet Goldmine.
Yeah, Todd Haynes kind of became a big deal with a little movie called Safe, in which Julianne Moore plays a woman who is allergic to everything, the air, the water, everything around her. And a really great performance from Julianne Moore, and it caused the studios to open their checkbooks and pay for Todd Haynes' next film called Velvet Goldmine, which is about the glam rocker years in the 1970s, based on David Bowie. And Bale had a part in this as a journalist and was very good. The film opened at Cannes in that year and bombed. Critics beat it up. I saw it at TIFF and quite liked it. I thought it was a great film. I'm a big Todd Haynes fan to begin with. And though this is one of his lesser movies, it's still interesting. He still digs deep into character and allows his actors to do the same. And Christian Bale is a hardcore method actor. He's from that generation of British actors that bought into method acting, hook, line, and sinker. Daniel Day-Lewis, Tim Roth, and Christian Bale being the three big ones. And a good performance, a really good performance from him.
Before we get into the 2000s, should mention that in 1999, in a television film called Mary, Mary, Jesus, Bale played Christ.
Yeah, and this is a little known movie. I saw it when it aired and quite liked it. Thought he was very good as Jesus Christ. He plays him as a young man, and it's more his relationship with his mother, with Mary, than it is really a biography of Jesus. But I liked it. It was a different approach. It was nicely directed by a guy named Kevin Connor. And Bale was a good choice, a very good choice for Christ. And, a lot of actors have played Jesus. They always call it the most important role they've ever played. And if he calls it that, then he delivered the goods. He was fine.
I'm going to talk about one of my favorite movies and one of my favorite Christian Bale performances, based on the novel of the same name by Bret Easton Ellis. In 2000, Christian Bale portrayed Patrick Bateman in American Psycho. Now, this was a movie that I actually had seen, I guess, when it came out, and I was 14, and I really hated it. I didn't like the ambiguous ending, and I was just too young to get it. And then later,
Way too young. Way too young to get it. 14?
yeah,
Jesus.
yeah. But later, when he was cast as Bruce Wayne, I decided to revisit the film. And I realized that it was satirical and realized how dark and funny it was at points. And I later read the book, which is an insane roller coaster ride of a novel. And the film only really covers about a quarter to a third of the things that are described in the novel. But he is manic and hilarious and subtle and over the top all at the same time, and he's just brilliant as Patrick Bateman.
It really is a sensational performance, and you're absolutely right. It's a satire. I also think it's a black comedy.
Yeah, for sure.
Because there's so many dark elements in it. But he sold himself completely over to Mary Herron's interpretation, and she asked him to do things that other actors would have balked at. He didn't. He threw himself into it. He whipped himself into incredible physical condition. The guy had the body of Adonis. You know, the opening scenes where he's showering and doing the whole facial thing. It's just stunning. You can't take your eyes off him. And then he pulls a chain or an axe and hacks into Jared Leto's head. And you realize that he's out of his mind. He's absolutely out of his mind. I think one of the great scenes that I've seen in movie history that I laughed at but was also horrified at was when he chased the girl with the chainsaw.
Naked with the running shoes on.
Stark naked with running shoes. He took the time to put on running shoes.
Yeah.
And chased her down the hallway with a chainsaw. That was just terrifying.
Yeah, and I dig the commentary that he gives during the movie on stuff like Huey Lewis in the News and Whitney Houston. And in the book, there are literally entire chapters just dedicated to him critiquing pop music albums. And there's an entire chapter that is just him in the most painstaking minutia describing everything in his apartment. And it's just bafflingly mad and hilarious when you look at it on the whole. And Bale,
it almost juxtaposes his character, you know, that he's so into music and loves music so much, and the music is a soundtrack to his life.
Yeah.
And yet in the next frame he's batshit crazy, and we know it that he's out of his mind, and yet you can't take your eyes off him. He's interesting and he's funny.
And I think I love the credit card scene where they're all comparing their cards, which basically all look exactly the same. And he gets so upset that they don't like his the most. But I remember another scene that I laugh so hard at every time when he's walking into his office and he has the most stone serious look on his face with the headphones on his Walkman, and it's Walking on Sunshine is the song playing.
Yep.
It's like, that's the soundtrack to a serial killer. I'm walking on sunshine.
Absolutely.
It's dark and hilarious. Yeah.
The movie, it was so controversial that it's kind of sad, because at the year end, I completely expected to see some critics awards for Christian Bale. I thought the New York and LA film critics might have the courage to honor him for Best Actor. And he was in the running. He got votes, but he wasn't the winner. I think the movie was so controversial and so upsetting, people just shied away from it.
Yeah. Big cult following.
It does have a huge cult following to this day. To this day, it's got a massive cult following. And Canadian money made that movie.
You recognize a lot of scenes in downtown Toronto when you're watching it.
I recognize a lot of students that I taught through the years. Yeah, you know the little guy, the little elf at the Christmas party who walks through carrying drinks?
Yeah.
He was a student of mine, and there's 3 or 4 other kids that were students of mine as well in the film. And a lot of former film students of mine worked on it as electricians, gaffers, you know, on the production crew. So, you know, in that sense, it's a pretty personal film.
And yeah, again, I didn't get it at first, and then it's one of those films where through a different lens, you grow to really, really appreciate it, and just so dark and funny in so many ways. That same year, he appeared in John Singleton's revamp of Shaft.
And in Shaft, he played one of the nastiest villains you'll ever see. Just an entitled, spoiled, rich punk who kills and gets away with it because daddy has money. And he's such a smug, smarmy guy. You just want to smack the hell out of him. And, well, Shaft does. Shaft does. Shaft gets him. And it's such a great moment when he's finally brought down because he himself can't quite believe it.
In 2001, he appeared in Captain Corelli's Mandolin.
Yeah, this was a crushing disappointment. This was John Madden's first film after Shakespeare in Love. And, you know, Harvey Weinstein kept saying this is going to be another Academy Award winner. John Madden's directing it. Nick Cage is in it. And it was just awful on every level. It's a romance without ever being romantic. There's no connection between the lovers at all. Bale has a supporting role as Mandras, and nothing about it works. Nothing. Nicolas Cage is awkward and over the top and sometimes downright embarrassing. And Bale is just there. You know, it's not a performance that he dives into like he would do in later years. It's just kind of sits there.
It's amazing. Nicolas Cage really swings hard on both sides of the fence. Like when he's good, he is brilliant. And when he's bad, he is just terrible.
Roger Ebert called Nicolas Cage the single most fearless actor working in American movies. And I believe that. He's so bold. He's so daring. And you're right. He just gives it everything, good or bad.
In 2002, Bale appeared in a trio of films. The first one, Laurel Canyon.
It was an interesting little ensemble piece from Lisa Cholodenko, who went on to direct The Kids Are All Right with Julianne Moore and Annette Bening later on. Interesting little movie about a group of people living in the Laurel Canyon area of California. Some good performances. Bale fit into the ensemble, very nice. And no one really outshines the other. That same year, he was in a film called Reign of Fire, which I kind of liked when I saw it. But when I watched it about a year ago, I thought, what was I thinking? It's set in a future where dragons have come back and are populating the earth. And they are killer dragons. They will mess you up. And he's a dragon fighter. His name is Quinn Abercrombie. And it's a big special effects movie directed by Rob Bowman. It's dirty because the future looks dirty. Everything is ash because of the dragons. And I mean, the first time you see it, maybe it hooks you the first time. I don't know. I quite liked it the first time, but the second time, not so much. Not so much at all. Maybe it's because I saw.
Sorry, go ahead.
Maybe it's because I saw him do better work, more substantial work, and just wondered why he ever chose this.
It's got some interesting ideas, and it's kind of a cool premise. But yeah, I think you're right. That same year, he appeared in a dystopian sort of action film reminiscent of George Orwell's 1984 called Equilibrium.
And again, I saw this with the critics in the year it was released and have not seen it or even thought about it since. And I walked out of the movie and I had forgotten about it in half an hour. I couldn't tell you what it was about a half an hour later.
Yeah, I think I've seen it twice. It's all right. I think he's good in it, but it's an idea that's been done before and since better.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I would agree.
2004 is a notable year because we got a brilliant performance from Bale in. It's really kind of horrifying and haunting just because of the weight loss that he put on himself when he appeared as Trevor Resnick in The Machinist. Dropped to about 120 pounds.
Yeah, it was unhealthy, and I think it was dangerous.
It was,
and I think it alarmed him. He's done it since. He's never gone that low again, but he lost a ton of weight for The Fighter in 2010, and comes and goes with his weight. He packs it on, he loses it, packs it on, and loses it, which has got to be hard in his heart. But he went to a different level with The Machinist. I mean, even the hardcore method actors looked at him and said, "My God, what's this guy doing?" It's an interesting film. It's a brilliant performance. You're right about that. No question. The performance is so good it overshadows everything else about the movie. I mean, everything.
Yeah.
It's got good act. Jennifer Jason Leigh is in it. She's terrific. I'll watch her in anything. She's one of the most gifted actors that's never got a lot of attention ever. And he blows her off the screen with his performance. It's just an extraordinary piece of acting. And the visual element is quite something, because you can't believe it when you see him without his shirt. It's like, my God, is that a double? Did they find somebody emaciated? But it's him. It's him. The full shots are there, head to toe.
It's the kind of thing that would be done with CGI today, and they sort of did that with Robert Downey Jr. at the beginning of Avengers Endgame, but
Yeah, yeah.
with him, it's haunting. And following up his role in The Machinist, because he had lost so much weight and then subsequently gained a bunch of weight for his next role, he broke all the records for most weight gain for a movie. He put on a full 100 pounds when Christopher Nolan cast him as Bruce Wayne in Batman Begins. He actually got bigger than they wanted him to. They had just come to him after he did The Machinist, and they said, get as big as you can. And he showed up looking almost like a wrestler, like really big and bulky, and he had to trim down.
He packed on so much muscle that it scared Nolan. He said, "This is a Batman. They're gonna call him the Pillsbury Doughboy. He was so big."
Yeah,
but he settled into the role. I mean, it's a trilogy, and I think any listener knows, any reader knows what you and I think of the trilogy. I'm a huge fan. One of the only comic book trilogies I'm a big fan of. But he is, in my mind, still the best Batman that's existed. I love what he did with both Bruce Wayne and the Cape Crusader. I thought he was absolutely terrific. I think Nolan did an extraordinary job, especially with the middle film. And the middle film is always the movie that nobody really grabs except for The Empire Strikes Back. And yet here, it's the best of them.
I remember I've been fortunate enough that I've always sort of been the appropriate age for that time's incarnation of Batman, being a big fan, obviously, since childhood. And I was 19 when Batman Begins came out, and I was so ready for an earnest sort of Batman film that treated it like a crime thriller instead of this action adventure thing, which we had seen before in the Burton Schumacher films. And it really set the standard for superhero origin stories and reboots. It became the first real reboot that started the trend, which would be seen the following year with Casino Royale. And I always think about Jack Nicholson's Joker from Tim Burton's Batman, and that great line where Batman swoops in and saves Vicky Vale and leaves, and the Joker says, "Where does he get all those wonderful toys?" Well,
Yeah.
Batman Begins, it explains all of that. We don't see Batman until halfway through the movie, and it's just a brilliant origin story, and it's been imitated but never duplicated.
It's probably the best of the origin stories. I agree with that. You mentioned reboots. I think that's been good and bad.
Yeah,
I think some reboots are exceptional. I think there's been too many Spider-Man, way too many. And the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man are better forgotten than anything else. I thought Tobey Maguire was terrific. I like this new guy, this Tom Holland. I think he's very good. But Andrew Garfield, no, not at all.
No, those movies didn't have any reason to exist.
They were made because they had the licensing. That's it.
Yeah, and then they realized the error of their ways and struck a deal with Disney. And the best thing about the new Spider-Man is they've really nailed the character. They got a great actor, and he's a teenager, but it was incredibly satisfying to us fanboys to get to see him play in the world of the Avengers and have that sort of hero mentor relationship with Tony Stark. And we're going to see more. I mean, after what happened with Avengers Endgame, Spider-Man's going to be a big deal, and I think there's still good stories to tell, but that's a subject for another podcast. Also in 2005, I know a film that you're a big fan of, directed by Terrence Malick, the second time Bale appeared in a movie about John Smith and Pocahontas. We're talking about The New World.
I was a big fan of this. I was a big fan of Terrence Malick initially. I loved his work in the 70s, Badlands and Days of Heaven. I loved what he did with the war film, The Thin Red Line. And I liked very much what he did with A New World. It's a very meditative, patient movie. No great action sequences. It just tells its story as honestly as possible. And in this film, Bale plays John Rolfe, who ends up marrying Pocahontas when she goes back to England with him. And it's a beautiful movie. I mean, you can just about smell the cedars and the pines. of the forest, and the water, the streams and lakes look so pristine and beautiful. But with Malick films, it's not fast moving.
No.
And I think audiences were bothered by that. It took something to get into it. I was in hook, line, and sinker. I was with the movie. I loved it. I think it's Colin Farrell's best work. I think it's one of Malick's best films. But it never really found a great audience. I was shocked it received just 2 Academy Award nominations, cinematography and sound. I was absolutely blown away by that because, 2005 was an okay movie year, but this was one of the best movies I saw in that year, and it just got no attention.
I do think Colin Farrell's really great in it, although I have a very soft spot for his work in Bruges.
Yeah, me too. Big fan.
Also, 2005, a more forgettable film, sort of an LA crime film directed by David Ayer. Bale appeared in Harsh Times. Sort of forgettable.
It is. I saw it at TIFF and liked it. Had a great time watching it and realized about an hour after I'd seen it, I had forgotten the entire plot.
Yeah.
And not that it was a bad movie. It wasn't. It was impeccably well made by David Ayer. It just been there, done that. Had been there 1,000 times before and better. But good performance from him. But by this point in his career, he's always doing good work. He seems incapable of doing, anything less than great.
In 2006, he dropped a ton. It's interesting we mentioned the weight because it's not just that Christian Bale has changed his weight so many times. It's that it's always bouncing up and down like a ball. Like he won't ever do 3 movies in a row where he's skinny and then 3 in a row where he's fat. Like he did The Machinist where he was a skeleton. Then he did Batman Begins where he was jacked. And then he does Rescue Dawn where he played Dieter Dengler, prisoner of war, in a film directed by Werner Herzog. Got really, really skinny again.
Yep. And a good film and a great performance. Werner Herzog runs hot and cold. When he's great, as he was with Nosferatu in 1979, he's absolutely brilliant. When he's ordinary, as he was with Rescue Dawn, he's still better than most. And Bale's performance in here as Dieter Dengler was exceptional. Really, really powerful piece of acting. And his looks, the haunted quality he brings to the performance suggests things that he's seen at war that he just can't articulate or even want to imagine anymore. It's a really good performance.
It is. And you talk about method acting. This is absolutely an example of that. There's a scene where he eats maggots, and that's Christian Bale eating maggots.
Yep. That's protein. And that's what he said during press interviews. Well, it was protein.
Yeah, totally. That same year, he reunited with Christopher Nolan in one of the director's, I guess, not more famous films, but one I absolutely love, and I love Bale in it, and that's The Prestige.
It's got a huge following. I mean, and not just with fans of Christopher Nolan, but fans of movies in general really dig this movie. And I remember I liked it. I didn't love it, but I liked it. And I saw it a couple of years ago, and I felt exactly the same. Didn't love it, but I liked it. And I understand why people like it. I mean, it's thoroughly entertaining. It's got some great twists and turns all the way through it, beautifully acted. And Nolan is always in control, always in command of his storytelling.
What I think is so interesting about it, aside from all the, like the great performances and the great look of the film, in the trailer and at the beginning of the film, Michael Caine describes the 3 parts of a magic trick. And The Prestige is the final reveal. This whole movie acts as a big magic trick.
It does from beginning to end. And
Yeah.
Nolan keeps us guessing, keeps it moving, keeps it mysterious, if that's the right word, and pulls it off. Absolutely pulls it off.
And he shoots it in such a way where you see just enough of Fallon,
Yes.
but not too much. And then when the twist is revealed, it's like, oh, wow. And then you can never watch it the same way again afterwards, having known it. And then Bale said he had charts and maps out to make sure he knew what he was doing in each scene. And again, like you said, he's always doing great work by this point in his career. And I really loved it. I dig the movie a lot.
Very complicated movie. You really have to pay attention for when the twist comes, when the moment comes, you say, oh, and you can't really believe he pulled it over on you, but he did.
Yeah, absolutely. Very meticulously directed by a guy who's shown himself to be a master. In 2007, Bale appeared in the James Mangold remake of 3:10 to Yuma. And you talk about remakes, reboots, some being good, some being bad. I think this is a pretty damn good one.
Really good one, a really good one. Everybody in the film is terrific. Russell Crowe is excellent. Bale is terrific. Ben Foster is terrifying as a psychopathic killer. And Bale plays a farmer who has lost a leg in the Civil War, and he can't turn down the $200 that he's going to be awarded if he delivers a very bad guy, played by Russell Crowe, to the train to take him to be hung. And his son somehow ends up going along and watching everything that happens. And he has to prove to his son he's a man. He seems to really want to do that, and places himself in all kinds of trouble and all kinds of peril, and is almost at odds with Russell Crowe for most of the film, but then they become allies. And Russell Crowe's character, by the end of the picture, really respects him and kills his own crew for taking down Christian Bale. It's a pretty powerful Western, vastly superior to the original.
That same year, he reunited with Todd Haynes in a movie that's quite interesting. We know now that Timothée Chalamet is going to play Bob Dylan in a biopic, but I'm Not There isn't really a traditional biopic. It's a movie inspired by the life and music of Bob Dylan, and 6 different actors to depict different facets of Dylan's persona. And so you've got Bale, along with Marcus Carl Franken, Richard Gere, Heath Ledger, Ben Whishaw, and Cate Blanchett, even, who all play different versions of Bob Dylan. It's an interesting little film.
And I think the best of the Bob Dylans is Cate Blanchett. I thought she
Agreed.
was absolutely brilliant. She was nominated for Best Supporting Actress. Steals the movie. Absolutely steals the movie. And Bale was, a good, solid actor, very much part of the ensemble in this movie, did his job. Didn't stand out, but did his job and, delivered a good performance, surrounded by great performances.
2008, he comes back as Bruce Wayne Batman in The Dark Knight, greatest comic book movie ever made and the best film of that year.
I agree. Absolutely agree. 8 Academy Award nominations, but not Best Director, not Best Picture, despite winning the LA Film Critics Award for Best Picture, despite a DGA nomination for Nolan for Best Director, despite appearing on more 10 best lists than any other movie that year. This movie kicked ass. Nolan proved that a comic book movie, a superhero movie, could be art. And if you go back and watch it, you can't quite believe how great it is and how subtle it is. And, the performances, Bale again is a fantastic Dark Knight. And that great final scene where he coaxes, I suppose, Commissioner Gordon into making him the bad guy. Hunt me, because I can take it. I thought, wow, this guy kicks ass. This guy's a fucking superhero.
You know what? I was totally I remember at the end of Batman Begins when nobody knows how to end a movie like Christopher Nolan. I'm fully convinced of that. The final scenes in his movies are always just so fucking bang on. And when they teased the Joker, everyone was like, who's going to be the Joker? And people were pissed off when they said, oh, the gay cowboy, Heath Ledger, who, the rest is history. He absolutely destroyed it, killed it, won the Academy Award. It upsets me that some people say he won it because he died, which is not true. He absolutely deserved it.
Absolutely.
And Kevin Smith called this the Godfather Part 2 of comic book movies. And I think that's a good description. But I remember thinking going into The Dark Knight, I'm like, this movie's going to end like Tim Burton's Batman ended. It's going to have Gotham City embracing Batman as its hero after he saves the day. And nope. It just ends on such a down note, and it becomes this searing tragedy. And it's like, wow, that's even way better than I could have imagined. And I had high expectations.
It stayed right with the title, The Dark Knight, right through to the end of the film.
Yeah.
And when I named this as my best film of the year, a lot of people who know me, a lot of readers were, really? 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 Better than Milk, better than The Wrestler, better than anything else released that year.
I remember I was your student when it came out, and I came and sat down in your office. I think actually I ran into you on the elevator, and I told you how excited I was to see it, and you said that you had already seen it. And then I think a week later, I came and sat down in your office, and we talked about it for about a half hour. And I was,
Yep.
yeah, I mean, it's still, it set the bar for comic book movies, and it still hasn't been matched.
I agree.
The following year, Christian Bale, we have to mention this. He played John Connor in the worst Terminator movie, Terminator Salvation.
Just a terrible film, directed by somebody named McG, who obviously came from the rock video world or hip hop video or something.
Music video director. Yeah.
Music video, but just has no idea how to put a film together. And it's so bad, it's embarrassing. And unfortunately, Christian Bale got dragged down with it. Just a terrible film. I think it was number 3 on my worst of the year.
It's now most famous for Christian Bale's freak out on set that got caught on a hot mic. But the thing that is so awful about it, aside from it being the one Terminator movie that doesn't have Schwarzenegger in it, is they abandoned the time travel story plot. It's like, well, if you're going to make a Terminator movie, there's kind of some bullet points you're supposed to follow. I don't know what the hell they were thinking making this movie. I
don't either. It's one of the worst films that's ever been made in that decade. Just terrible.
That same year, he appeared as Melvin Purvis in Michael Mann's John Dillinger story, Public Enemies.
And I think I liked this a lot more than you did. I thought Johnny Depp was fantastic as Dillinger, and I thought Bale was outstanding as Melvin Purvis. Melvin Purvis was a real guy. He doggedly pursued criminals. He was chosen by Hoover as almost the golden boy of the new G-Men, and he believed in what he was doing. He truly did believe in it. And killing them was okay. Killing them was all right in his book. If they were going to turn a gun on him, he was going to put a bullet in them. And I thought Bale was terrific in the movie. I thought Johnny Depp was terrific. It's a typical Michael Mann movie. It moves. Everything in a Michael Mann movie always seems to be in motion. Most evident in The Last of the Mohicans. But again, everything is in motion in Public Enemies constantly. And yet it remains a really good character study.
I like it. I think it's a good movie. It just didn't blow my hair back. And I took issue with some of the facts being played fast and loose with. But I mean, overall, I mean, it's not a bad movie. And like you said, there's a lot of great actors in it, great performances. In 2000,
it's not Terminator Salvation. Let's put it that way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I'm a fan of Michael Mann. I love Collateral. I think that's a brilliant movie.
Me too.
In 2010, Bale got real skinny again, where he played crack addict / boxer Dickie Eklund in David O. Russell's boxing movie, The Fighter, alongside Mark Wahlberg.
It's a fantastic movie. It's so beautifully acted by the entire cast, and not just Christian Bale, but Mark Wahlberg, Amy Adams, Melissa Leo. They're all terrific in the movie. And he finally won his Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for the film as Dickie Eklund, who, as you say, was a crack addict, a former fighter, whose big claim to fame was knocking down Sugar Ray Leonard. A lot of people stand by the fact Sugar Ray Leonard tripped. Some people do claim that Dickie did put him down. I don't know. I've never seen the fight. Couldn't tell you. I do know that Dickie Eklund was the best coach his brother ever had. He believed in his brother, and he knew exactly how to coach him. And he coached him all the way to a championship. And great movie. Absolutely great movie. One of the best films of the year. And Bale richly deserved that Academy Award. From the first moment I saw the movie, there was no doubt he was going to win the Oscar.
That opening scene, you just know it.
Oh my God, he's transformed. I mean, we've seen him in many, many movies, and yet he always looks different. He's this generation's Lon Chaney, no man of a thousand faces.
I remember 30 seconds into that opening scene on the couch, I'm like, this is Batman. What the hell? Like,
yeah, but it's not.
It's
great about
absolutely not.
Yeah, there's no trace of Patrick Bateman, of anybody he's ever played. He's a completely different character each time.
he sinks into that Bostonian accent, and you feel
Oh,
like he's lived there his whole life. He's a chameleon. He disappears.
and he seems to elevate Mark Wahlberg. Wahlberg's a decent enough actor. He's not a great actor, but he's okay. But he seems elevated in all of his scenes with Christian Bale and Amy Adams in particular.
Yeah, they have a great chemistry. In 2011, Bale appeared in The Flowers of War. I didn't see this one.
It's a foreign language movie directed by Zhang Yimou, and it was good. It was good. He helps a bunch of women during the war and risks his life to do so. It's a good movie. It's not a great movie. It's a good performance, not a great performance. It's a different thing for an English-speaking actor to appear in a foreign language film because the culture is completely different. And body language or languages or sounds can mean something totally different. And you really see that at play in this movie. Bale sometimes looks downright uncomfortable in the film. But overall, it's a beautiful film to look at, just not in his top echelon of movies.
In 2012, once again, working with Christopher Nolan, Bale became the first actor to play Batman in 3 major motion pictures. Dark Knight Rises is a unique comic book movie because it serves as an ending to a story. Kevin Smith famously said most comic book stories are all second acts because they have to keep going. You're never really supposed to end them. This one did that. It's a big, fun movie. It's excellently directed by Christopher Nolan. I think Bane, as played by Tom Hardy, is a formidable villain. Certainly doesn't match The Dark Knight, but, overall, pretty damn good movie.
I would agree. It's got a lot of great things in it. The relationship between he and Alfred is fleshed out
Yeah.
and destroyed, eventually destroyed. And I liked Marion Cotillard very much in the movie as the connection, that lost child everybody keeps talking about. And Anne Hathaway, I thought, was terrific as the cat burglar, who in essence is Catwoman. The end of it, when they brought Levitt back as Robin, and he ends up in the Batcave, I really thought that we were going to get a 4th film and a 5th film and a 6th film, and that eventually they would bring Batman back. I'm glad they didn't. I'm glad they haven't done that, because it does end, and it does free him of being Bruce Wayne and Batman forever. And a lot of people question that final sequence in Italy. Is it a fantasy? I don't think so. I like to think it's real. I like to think Alfred's dream had some reality to it, and Bruce Wayne finally got to have a life free of Gotham City.
Yeah, I never thought it was a fantasy. I mean, 5 minutes after the movie ended, I went to myself, I'm like, wait a minute, Bruce Wayne is as famous as Christian Bale. There's no way he can live in anonymity, but you're not really supposed to focus on that. The Robin thing with Joseph Gordon-Levitt, that's sort of just a tip of the hat to the Robin character, because Nolan said he never really wanted to include Robin. But, it was satisfying. I remember walking out of that movie feeling very satisfied.
I did too. I was thoroughly entertained. He did not screw it up like Joel Schumacher did. And it could have gone in that direction after The Dark Knight. It's got nowhere to go but down, because you're never going to improve in The Dark Knight. And he made a solid film that's just below The Dark Knight.
Yeah, it always made me wonder, had Heath Ledger tragically not died, there could have been more than 3 movies. The Joker could have done a lot more.
I agree.
There was no way you should have ever recast him in that universe. And so moving on, we're into 2013, and Scott Cooper made a film called Out of the Furnace, which I know you're a big fan of.
I did. I like this a lot. For the acting only. The narrative, the direction is okay, but the performances are absolutely first rate. Bale is tremendous. The entire cast is absolutely terrific. It stars Christian Bale, Casey Affleck, Woody Harrelson, Forrest Whitaker, Willem Dafoe. I mean, how do you lose with a cast like that?
Mm-hmm.
And it deals with a Pennsylvania steel mill worker and his brother Rodney, who is a veteran of the Iraq War and just cannot adjust to civilian life. And it's a very powerful character study. It was probably the second real inkling that Casey Affleck was going to be something very special. He had knocked it out of the park for Big Brother Ben in Gone Baby Gone. And very soon after this, he'd win the Academy Award for Manchester by the Sea, which I think is one of the greatest performances ever put on film. And he and Bale had a lovely chemistry. You believed that they were connected.
That same year, Bale worked with David O. Russell again in another ensemble cast, American Hustle. This is a pretty acclaimed movie. I think the acting is brilliant. I think it's better than the movie as a whole.
I agree. And there's just so many great actors in this thing. The one that didn't get enough credit, I thought, was Jeremy Renner, who plays the mayor. I thought he was exceptional. But Bradley Cooper, Amy Adams, Jennifer Lawrence. Jennifer Lawrence was the woman from hell in this movie. Every time she was on screen, it was a jolt of energy. And Bale again, the chameleon with a comb over and wearing a toupee and looking ridiculous with the big belly and romancing Amy Adams. And yet she goes for it because they're like-minded. They're con artists. And they were both terrific in the movie. All of them got Academy Award nominations, every one of them, all richly deserved. And Bale, for the first time, was a Best Actor nominee.
Being a comic book movie fan, I used to joke about this movie because all the lead stars have played comic book characters, and it's American Hustle, starring Rocket Raccoon, Lois Lane, Batman, Mystique, and Hawkeye.
Sure enough.
Yeah. Let's talk about the dreadful Exodus, Gods and Kings, or maybe not.
Bad beyond belief. I mean, I watched this movie with the critics in 2014. I was really looking forward to it because Ridley Scott, man. I mean, Thelma and Louise, Gladiator, Blade Runner. He's directed some of the most seminal movies of our generation. And here he is. He took over for Steven Spielberg. Spielberg was going to outright remake the Ten Commandments. And they get into script trouble, so Spielberg stepped away, gave it to Ridley Scott. He cast Christian Bale as Moses and Joel Edgerton as Ramses. And I was still in. I was still there. And 20 minutes into the movie, I thought, oh boy, we're in trouble. And were we in trouble? This was just dreadful. Beautifully designed, the art direction, second to none. But what a stupid, stupid movie. They pay so much attention to the plagues of Egypt. I think we see all of them. And the part of the Red Sea looks like the Red Sea looks like a big toilet flushing. And there's nothing majestic about Moses. There's nothing that suggests he's God's instrument on earth. Nothing. And it was, hey, I named this the worst movie of the year, and I stand by it. Just a piece of junk.
Very disappointing after the previous year, Darren Aronofsky made Noah, a movie that I'm a big fan of. So, yeah, I had high hopes, but
Yeah, it was awful. It was awful. And you're right. After the Passion of the Christ and Apocalypto and Noah, you would think Ridley Scott, who directed, Kingdom of Heaven, would go in the right direction. But he blew it, man. He blew it.
Yeah, Ridley Scott, he's one of those guys that he's hit and miss. He's a genius, but he's definitely hit and miss.
When he's on, he's one of the best. He reminds me of John Boorman. John Boorman directed Deliverance, Hope and Glory, but he also directed Exorcist II, The Heretic, and Zardoz. When he's on, he's on. And when he's not, stand back.
Yeah. In 2015, Bale worked with Malick again in Night of Cups. What are your thoughts on that?
I hate it. I hate every movie Terrence Malick made after The Tree of Life and up to the film he made last year at TIFF, the war film about the Holocaust. This was just stupid. It was largely improvised. He hired actors and then cut out their entire scenes and didn't tell them. They found out the night the movie premiered. And Bale looks uncomfortable. He looks uneasy. He looks like he's watching Malick off screen saying, now try this, now try this, now try this. That's no way to work. I mean, there has to be a level of trust between the actor and the director. And sure, the director trusts the actor the minute he casts them. But then the director's got to pull them through the movie. And if there's no script, if there's no idea, if there's no vision, there's no point. And Malick stopped having a vision for his movies a long, long time ago. He's egocentric to the point of it being pretentious and pathological. A Hidden Life, which I saw at TIFF last year, was very good, very good. A return to the great movie making that we know Malick can do. But in between were these horrible, horrible movies with Ben Affleck, Natalie Portman, Kate Blanchett, and God help him, poor Christian Bale.
It's interestingly enough, that same year, he had a movie out with a director who is sort of a master of improvisation with his casts. And I remember Adam McKay, he started off as Will Ferrell's co-writer on Saturday Night Live and is responsible for some of my favorite running skits on that show. And of course, he made Anchorman and Talladega Nights and Step Brothers. And then him and Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg made The Other Guys, which was a buddy cop sort of spoof, but it was the first inclination that Adam McKay was a smart guy and he might have actually had some interesting stuff to say. And then in 2015, he makes The Big Short,
which was terrific. Absolutely terrific. Intelligent, smart, beautifully written, beautifully directed. The performances were all first rate. And you know what? Any movie that puts Margot Robbie in a bathtub to explain high finance, I'm down with. I'm okay with that. I thought it was great. And, you know, as Michael Burry, the financial wizard, Bill was absolutely brilliant. I mean, almost manic in his constant looking at his computer screens and looking at money and deciphering when there's going to be a big loss and a big gain, working barefoot, and just a bizarre, strange guy, yet positively brilliant. And you can see the intelligence in him. We see that throughout the movie. And he was again nominated for Best Supporting Actor. Again, richly deserved. Great performance.
They managed to make a very boring subject move like a freight train. And
they did, and they made it interesting. And I learned a lot watching the movie. I learned so much about the housing crisis. And I didn't have a clue about it when it started. I mean, something went wrong. Yeah, the banks were screwing people, got it. But not in this detail. I mean, it was just exceptional.
Yeah, I worked in mortgages for several years, and so I was very, very fascinated by it. And I did appreciate, obviously, for obvious reasons, Margot Robbie in a bathtub, but I thought that was a nice nod to The Wolf of Wall Street. And I sort of feel like this film is a companion piece to that.
It might be. It just might be.
2016, The Promise.
This was a strange little movie directed by Terry George, who directed Hotel Rwanda. And it starred Oscar Isaac, Charlotte LeBron, and Christian Bale. And it's set in the final years of the Ottoman Empire. And it's a strange little movie. Bale plays an Armenian medical student, and they all come together just before the Armenian genocide. And there'd been a movie that Adam Agoyan directed back in, I think 2000, about the Armenian genocide. And I didn't know much about it, but I learned a lot about it watching that film. And The Promise, to me, was rather empty. If you're dealing with genocide, aren't you supposed to be emotional? Aren't you supposed to be connected to the material? And I never felt the director was. And I felt the same way about Hotel Rwanda. I was never deeply moved by Hotel Rwanda. I liked the Don Cheadle character very much, but I didn't care about anyone else in the movie. And I felt the same in The Promise. I really didn't care about anybody. And, you know, when you're making a movie about this subject matter, I think you should care.
I remember 2017, my first year working in TIFF. We actually sat side by side when we watched Scott Cooper's Hostiles, a brilliant Western.
Absolutely. And if I'm correct, I think we both loved it.
We did, yes.
I was absolutely shocked at the end of the year when this was not nominated for a single Academy Award. I think it's not just one of the best films of that year. I think it's one of the great Westerns ever made, and pays homage to John Ford, to John Wayne, to Clint Eastwood, to Unforgiven, to all the great Westerns of the past. Bale gives one of his best performances as Captain Joseph J. Blocker, who's close to retiring from the military, but is given one last task to take an Indian family home because the chief is dying of cancer. And they're targeted by a fanatical group of Indian murderers, and they band together, they work together to get the family home. And at the end of the film, Bale is insulted by a landowner who also insults the Indians, and he takes them on, and they fight again side by side. And it's got such a beautiful lyrical ending where you think he and the woman that he saved and who feels safe with him are going to part, and they don't. And it's done so beautifully. He just steps on the train and he's going to go off with her. And it's just a stunner, just a stunner. He should have been nominated for this. It should have been up for Best Director, Best Picture, Best Actor, Supporting Actors, at least 10 Academy Awards. And instead it was snubbed completely.
Really is one of the best Westerns I've ever seen.
I agree. And one of his best performances. I mean, he is ferocious in this film. He's a killer. He's an absolute killer. He talks early in the film about cutting men stem to stern. And then at the end of the film, he does just that. And we see it from behind. And it is frightening. It's frightening that he would do it, but it's also just, the guy deserves it.
In 2016, Disney released the quote-unquote live-action remake of The Jungle Book, which was directed by Jon Favreau. There was also in production at the time another adaptation of Rudyard Kipling's novel, The Jungle Book, which was not being made by Disney. It wasn't released until 2018. This was directed by Andy Serkis, probably my favorite actor in the world. And it was done entirely at his studio, the Imaginarium, where the actors did the performances via motion capture. And Christian Bale appears as Bagheera, and he's great.
It's a good movie. It was made by Netflix, which is a nice thumb of the nose at Disney. It started at Warner Brothers, then ended up going to Netflix, and had different directors before Andy Serkis. At one point, Ron Howard was going to do it. At another time, Alejandro González Inarritu was going to do it, but he went off to do The Revenant. And so it fell to Andy Serkis. And he put together a great cast. Christian Bale, Cate Blanchett, Benedict Cumberbatch, Naomi Harris, and Andy Serkis himself. And yeah, he's terrific in the movie. They're all terrific in the movie. And had it been released before The Jungle Book, it might have done very well. Might have done very, very well. But unfortunately, Disney beat him to the punch.
It's notable for, it's obviously going to be compared to the Disney film in a lot of ways. Now, it's darker, for sure, as the source material is. And another thing, in Jon Favreau's movie, the animals are they're portrayed as photorealistically as possible. Whereas in this, you can see Benedict Cumberbatch's face in Shere Khan. You can see, like, elements of these actors, and that's a natural translation from the motion capture technology. But Andy Serkis proving himself to be a talented director as well as a great actor.
He is both, no question.
That same year, 2018, Christian Bale, there's so much to say about this. I think it's his greatest performance. I named it my best on my top 10 list. I couldn't believe it when Adam McKay, who proved himself so well with The Big Short, said he was going to make a biopic of former Vice President Dick Cheney, and he was going to cast Christian Bale as Dick Cheney. Now, I remember seeing photographs from the set of Christian Bale having gained the weight and wearing the prosthetics and the wig and the glasses, and he looked appropriate. And I was like, oh, okay. And Bale's brilliant. He'll pull it off. And then the trailer came out and my jaw hit the floor.
I think when that trailer dropped, everybody's jaw hit the floor, because beyond looking like Dick Cheney and, appearing to resemble Dick Cheney with the prosthetics and the weight gain, he sounded like him. He had the body language like him. He had that clipped voice that Dick Cheney had. And he had those penetrating, insidious eyes. Dick Cheney's an evil man, I think, truly an evil man, and was responsible for many, many wrongs in the Bush administration. And Bale captured all of that. He was the puppet behind George W. Bush. And we see that clearly when Sam Rockwell, as George W. Bush, brilliant as George W. Bush, is convincing him to be his running mate. He just keeps pushing for more, and I could do this, and I could do this, and I can do this. And Bush, okay. Bush was a dumb cracker, and he was played by one of the masters of Washington. And you're right. I think it's one of Bale's great performances. You think it's the best? I don't think it's his best. I think Hostiles is. But it's certainly one of them. He was again nominated for an Academy Award. This was the year that the Academy lost their mind and gave it to Rami Malek for Bohemian Rhapsody. Why? I don't know, but they did. And Bale would have been a more honorable winner. Viggo Mortensen would have been a more honorable winner for Green Book. But for whatever reason, they went with Rami Malek.
Yeah, my vote 100% would have gone to Bale for that Oscar. And we've talked about Rami Malek and the Taron Egerton snub this past year for Rocket Man. You mentioned the puppet master element to this Dick Cheney, George W. Bush relationship. And again, yeah, Sam Rockwell, brilliant as George W. Bush. I remember the scene when he's in Bush's office and he's sort of being like, hey, you want some grits? You want some burnt ends? And it's George about the phone call. Oh, you're a brass tacks guy. I like that. And you hear Cheney's inner monologue. What does he want? He wants to impress his father. And smart movie and really funny and a hauntingly brilliant performance. He just is Cheney in every way.
Well, you come away from the movie thinking that Dick Cheney knew more about George W. Bush than one, anyone alive, and two, George W. Bush knew about himself. I mean, he had him, and he knew Bush was going to listen to anything he said, and he did. Sure enough, he did. And with the film, I thought McKay did something brilliant. About partway through, suddenly the credits roll.
Yeah.
What? We're done? And we're not. We're not at all done.
Right.
But a brilliant satire, great black comedy, and yet an extraordinary biographical character performance.
I love the opening title card where it says, this is an honest portrayal of one of the as honest as it could be, because Dick Cheney is one of the most secretive leaders in U.S. history, but
Very
we did our fucking best.
Yep.
2019, we both saw it at TIFF. Bale portrays Ken Miles in Ford v. Ferrari.
I really like this movie. I'm not a car guy at all. I've never, ever cared about cars. You know, you start them up, you drive, you get to your destination, you're done. I've never cared if I was driving a great car or a crappy car. For years, I drove a van because I had children, and I was perfectly happy doing that. But Ford versus Ferrari is about the obsession with cars, with speed. And he plays one of the great minds of automobile building and racing, Ken Miles, who was hired by Ford to create a car that would go faster than the Ferrari and that he would drive. And that was insisted upon by the character Matt Damon plays. He had to be the driver because nobody else could do it. And again, Bale gives a fantastic performance. He speaks with a British accent, which always surprises me when he does, because he rarely does, and yet it's his native tongue.
Yeah.
And at Ken Miles, he speaks British, and you go, oh, a new accent. Oh, wait a minute. No, he is British. And I remember meeting Christian Bale for the first time I met him 3 times, 1999. And it was for a film that was at TIFF. I don't even remember what the movie was, but it must have been Midsummer's Night's Dream. And he came into the room and spoke with a British accent, and it took me back a bit. I thought, oh, that's right, he's British. And he's terrific as Ken Miles. Again, I was very surprised he wasn't nominated for Best Actor. Last year was a very competitive year, and I'm betting he was number 6 on the nominee list, but I think I'd have put him there. I think he'd have been in my top 5.
Yeah, he's great. And he's played so many iconic, like, American characters, including Batman, that it does kind of surprise you. Like, he kind of has a Cockney accent when he speaks normally. And I remember when Batman Begins came out, because I've seen all the bonus features on the DVD, but when he was doing the press for Batman Begins, he intentionally maintained an American accent because he didn't want people.
I know he did.
Yeah.
I was on that press tour, and he came into the room, he sat down, and he spoke without the accent. And again, I was surprised. And he said, have we met? And I said, yeah, we met for Midsummer Night's Dream. And he said, oh, okay, so you know the deal. I said, I know the deal.
Yeah. Just one thing I want to mention. You say you're not a car guy. I just want to mention this because it's kind of relevant. I am also not a car guy. I'm a guitar guy. That's how, car fanatics, I'm like that with musical instruments. But I always say there's only one car I have ever cared about, and that's the Batmobile, which is ironically an infinite number of different cars.
Yeah, like which one? Which one would be your favorite Batmobile?
Well, here's the answer to that. If I was going to get a Batmobile to actually drive around in, no question, the
You
Adam
know,
West 66 one.
do you know how insane that sounds, Nick? If I was going to get a Batmobile,
No, I know. I never would. But if like someone said, "Hey, we're going to build you a Batmobile for free. Which one do you want?" I'd get I'd get the old Adam West 60s one because that's like most like a practical car. Although this new one, the Robert Pattinson's going to be driving around in looks a lot like stripped back. But I mean, can you imagine driving around in like the Michael Keaton one or the Tumbler or any of that? No, it's ridiculous.
no,
Like I said, I'm not a
absolutely not.
Not a car.
Absolutely not. I
No,
can't.
not a car guy. But again, Christian Bale, a lot of people think he's the quintessential Batman. It's interesting. I believe, I don't know if it's confirmed or not, but he's rumored to appear in the forthcoming Marvel Cinematic Universe film Thor: Love and Thunder as a villain. So he might be jumping ship to Marvel. That'll be interesting.
I haven't heard that yet. It's not listed in any of his upcoming credits, but a lot of stuff gets leaked that isn't official on IMDb yet.
Yeah, true. And that film, of course, will be directed by Taika Waititi. It's going to bring back Natalie Portman, Chris Hemsworth. So coming off of Jojo Rabbit, should be interesting to see what they do with it.
Well, if Waititi's directing it, I'm there. After what he did with Jojo Rabbit, I'll watch anything he does.
Yeah, a very, very talented guy. Any final thoughts on Christian Bale?
No, I think, when people discuss Christian Bale, as you said, he's one of the great actors of his generation. And again, he's one of the generation to come out of Britain as a hardcore method actor. He looked up to De Niro and Pacino and Brando and all the great American method actors and has become one of the great method actors of all time. He and Daniel Day-Lewis, believing in method completely. And I think it's exciting that you have British actors who came out of England, educated probably in Elizabethan theater, became method actors because there was a long-standing feud between American and British actors as to who was superior. And I've always maintained Americans. But, it's great to see them coming over to our side, so to speak.
I'm still holding my breath for a reunion between Bale and Steven Spielberg.
I hope so. They have talked about it. They've certainly talked about working again. So hopefully they do. He at one time was considered making Munich. And that fell apart because he wanted to do Batman Begins.
And we're all the better for it.
I agree. And I thought Munich was exactly where it should have been. I thought it had a great cast.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us. Thanks to all our listeners. Be sure to check us out on our YouTube channel and to subscribe for this and all future episodes. And we'll be back soon. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
There you have it, folks. Episode number 15, Badass Bale. Thanks to all our listeners for joining us. Be sure to check us out on all the social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Most importantly, subscribe to our official YouTube channel for this, all past and future episodes of our podcast. Coming up, we got some cool shows. We're going to be taking a spotlight look at the 1980s, continuing our series of the 15 best lead actor performances, and we're going to do an expose on Mr. Tom Cruise. Until next time, we'll see you at the movies. And cut. Brennan.